Hey everyone, Ben from Postfly here with this month's saltwater tie. Sand eels are a dietary staple on the East Coast during the late spring and summer months, and this craft fur pattern is a great one to have at the ready. If you're new to common streamer tying skills involving craft fur and epoxies, the techniques seen here will also translate well for endless other eel and baitfish flies you'll see down the line. We'll start by tying in our white 6/0 thread behind the hook eye and building a base back to about where the hook point sits under the shank. Some of the materials we'll use shortly have a tendency to wrap around the hook, so the base will just be key in giving us traction as we go. Next, it's time to add in our first round of hackle. Your kit comes with a few different colors so you can get creative here, but for this demonstration, I'm just going to tie my sand eel in olive and white. 2 strands of white hackle will be going in right where we stopped our thread base. You'll want these strands to be about 3.5 times the length of the shank, so we'll have to size accordingly. Once you've measured your hackle, strip a few of the fibers back to mark the spot and cut. You can strip a few more fibers off afterwards to create a nice tag end, which we'll use to tie in. Our hackles will be attached slightly off the center on each side of the hook shank. Ensure the tag stays parallel to the shank as you tie it in, which will ensure the rest of the feather follows suit. Add your second hackle opposite the first and cover the tags with a few more thread wraps. Now we'll add some shimmer to our eel. Grab 2 strands of crystal flash and tie them in at their midpoint, just above where the hackle was added. Fold the front-facing strands over and tie in again so all 4 ends are now facing towards the tail. Cut each strand so that they're about the length or slightly shorter than the hackle tails. I like to cut mine individually to give the flash more of a varied look, but cutting all at once works fine too. Once secured, make open wraps up to behind the hook eye. Our flashaboo will be wrapped tightly around the hook shank to give our eel some additional sheen. Tie in a strand where you wrapped up and then start tying it back towards the tail. Securing our flashaboo up here anchors the material well and helps prevent it from coming undone when we start wrapping tightly. It will also protect it from coming off after a few eats when on the water. When you've reached your tie-in points for the hackle and crystal flash, advance your thread back to behind the eye again. Make wraps with the flashaboo by passing it in between your hands and keeping it tight at all times. At the original tie-in point, secure with thread and snip off the excess. Grab 4 strands of olive saddle hackle. You'll want these to be the same length as our white hackles from earlier, but size them to account for the extra added shank length from tying them in at the front of our fly. The first hackle will be tied in halfway down one side of the shank, with each one secured evenly spaced over the top until you've reached the side opposite from where you started. Hackle will give your pattern some great movement in the water, and having multiple feathers around the fly filling it out will emphasize the eel's action from all angles. Our fly will be rounded out by a bi-colored craft fur head. Start by taking your olive craft fur and isolating a clump that's about 1 inch thick. Cut near the base and strip any short strands out from the bottom. Your final cut and clean section, measured from behind the hook eye, should be about 2/3 of the length of your hackle tail. Tie in your craft fur with the tips facing forward. I find starting about 1/2 inch behind the eye gives you enough room to securely tie it in without running out of space as you get towards the eye. Start wrapping tightly, ensuring that all of the olive craft fur stays positioned only on top of the shank. You can even give the fur a quick test fold back to ensure you're not in danger of covering the hook eye. Whether or not you leave the tag ends of the craft fur is up to you. I find it helps the fur stay filled out a bit and form a head while still preserving the thin eel body when wet. Next, grab your white craft fur and prepare it in the same way as you did the olive, cutting it to size and pulling out the shorter strands. Invert the hook on your vise and line up the fur so that it extends to the same length as the fur on top of the shank. Then repeat the same tie-in process. As you did before, ensure that the 2 colors of craft fur stay on their respective sides of the shank. With both sections of craft fur set, flip your hook right side up again. Finalize the separation between the 2 colors by brushing individual segments into place. Now begin the process of folding your craft fur back to form the head of your fly. Start on top with the olive strand by pulling tailwards and continuing to sort out of place hairs. Then grab the lower white section and bring it back in the same manner. Take care to brush the fur around your hanging thread. It will still go, but might require some more maneuvering. As you continue to fold your fur, it can be helpful to use a tool to hold things in place while you work. The bottom of an old pen is a classic for this job and keeps everything set nicely while I continue to work on some stray hairs. At this point, the tying portion of this fly is almost done. Bring your thread to the front of your fold and make a small dam to keep everything behind the eye. The craft fur still isn't finished being set, so don't worry if you're having trouble keeping it folded. A small clip can keep everything out of the way while you prepare to whip finish. Wetting your hand and brushing back the fibers is another great trick here. Once you've made a few turns with your whip finisher, snip the thread. With the clip removed, your fly should look something like this. Now we'll just add some finisher to the head to keep everything set in place. An elastic waterproof sealant, either from a fly shop or your local hardware store, will do the trick here. Get a small amount of the stuff onto a paper towel and start applying it to the head of the fly, and ending a little above the hook point. A small brush, or in this case just a plastic butter knife, is a great applicator. You want to keep your craft fur pulled back to the desired size as you work. Only brush in the direction from the head towards the tail. It's also worth noting that most epoxies have some pretty strong fumes, so it's best to work in a well-ventilated area. Your epoxy will need some time to set once applied, so set this fly aside for now. The clip used earlier during the craft fur folding process can be used again here to hold everything in place if needed. When dry, your sand eel head should be holding its shape under a squishy, flexible seal. The epoxy also makes a great surface to add our eyes to. Peel 2 off from the paper in your kit. The eyes have a bit of adhesive on the back already, but they'll be made much more durable by applying a drop of super glue to the back. Fix them exactly opposite from each other, a little behind the hook eye. To secure our fold and really lock our eyes in, we can add a layer of UV resin to our head. You can apply the resin using either the applicator bottle or by brushing it on in a similar way you did the epoxy from earlier. I'll mention that the resin can also be used standalone in place of the epoxy, but experiment to see what you like better in terms of use, durability, and density. I use both here just as an example. With epoxy and UV resin set in place, your eel fly is ready to hit the water. This fly really slims down when wet for a natural profile, and the hackle and craft fur provide great undulating action in the water. Hope you put it to use soon. Thanks for watching.